So welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. I hope you enjoyed lunch as much as I did. This is my single favorite HR conference for many, many reasons, one of which is the food is better than any other HR conference you're ever going to go to, I promise. Today's topic is focused on you, which, right? What does that even mean? We're in HR, lady. Don't you get that? We're always about everybody else. Well, the topic is specifically named Physician Heal Thyself for that reason. The focus is on how does the work of psychological safety get going in an organization and what's going on within the HR community. So with that in mind, before we really dig into it, what I'd like you to do is just take a minute. Can everybody see the screen over here? Take a minute and just reflect on the statements that are up on the screen. You can write down how you would fill in the blank. You can put it in your phone, put it in your head, whichever you'd like. But just answer for yourself the questions that are posed up here. I'll give you about 60 seconds to do that. So you might wonder, why is she asking us that? Why is she asking that question? I'm going to tell you why. I'm asking because it matters. It matters to you. It matters to your loved ones. It matters to your friends. And probably, maybe even most importantly, it matters to your teammates. I promise we're going to be talking about that all today. I am Marissa Waldman, and as I was introduced, I'm the CEO of a wonderful little firm called Leaderology. We focus on leadership development and creating fearlessly authentic leaders. We are headquartered in Orange County and serve the entire United States, actually the globe. We have clients all over the world. My purpose for the last 30 years has 100% been about serving the HR community. And one thing you may not know about me, because it's certainly not in my bio, and it's nowhere on my LinkedIn profile, is that for the last 10 years, I have been involved in an unintentional blind study around the impact of psychological safety on business performance. And we're going to talk about that today too. But let's go back to these questions. For some of you, you may have thought, it's been a couple weeks. Maybe even a month or two. But one of the things that I find when I ask this question about your colleagues around the country is that many of them say, yikes. It's been a long, long time since I had these feelings of comfort and safety. Why is that? Any ideas? Well, as we stand here, or I stand here, the rest of you sit here, on December 13th, 2022 in beautiful Los Angeles, California. The State of the Union is completely nuts. As we've been hearing all morning, this has been the end of another wild year, right? That whole pandemic thing, not over. All the change in the economy, not over. Everything continues to change. The trauma continues to come. I asked my team to put together a slide of headlines, just some sample headlines. And when I saw this, I gasped, right? That is no joke. Look at some of those headlines. The murder of George Floyd, COVID, ICUs, all of this. And you know what is even scarier? Look at the dates. This is not a decade's worth of headlines. This is not even 5 years worth of headlines. These headlines have come from the last 3 to 4 years. Breathtaking, gut punch. When I see that, I have a physical reaction to it. While all of you in HR have been doing a stellar job, just killer job, managing your teams, your organizations through this trauma, I don't think it's overly dramatic to say that this much time on the front lines leaves a mark. It's PTSD inducing, right? That's not being overly dramatic. Back in June, when the Dobbs v. Jack, what's the guy's name? It overturned Roe v. Wade. That's the part we all care about. When that happened, we convened a virtual group of HR leaders, and I said to them, how are you managing? How's this hitting? What's going on out there? And one person said he was managing with excessive consumption of alcohol. The truth of the matter is that when we are turning to liquid courage to just get through the day, something's got to give. Yeah? So, with that in mind, I think it's safe to say that we are all in a self-preservation mode, whether you know it or not. I think that for me and the people that I've been talking to, the hits just keep coming. I don't even know if I have an opportunity, the time to really process every mass shooting, every overturn of the Supreme Court taking away our rights. There's just massive amounts of data coming in and massive amounts of trauma. To borrow an example from the airline industry, right? We have been told for years by flight attendants, in the case of an emergency, don your oxygen mask first before assisting others. We've all heard it. Thankfully, I hope nobody's ever actually had to do that. But as HR leaders, what are we doing? How are we donning our oxygen masks first before attending to the needs of the organization? What are we doing to make sure that we are at our best? Now, I know that all of you are ensuring that your teams are really leaning into work-life balance, and you're all making sure people are getting exercise and reading right, or eating right, reading right. They should read right too. Eating right. But in this case, right now, with this constant onslaught of trauma, the oxygen mask truly right now is psychological safety, 100%. So, if this is the first time you've ever kind of heard this, psychological safety is a term that was defined in 1999 by Dr. Amy Edmondson, who is a professor in the Harvard Business School. And I say that specifically because I want you to hear it. This is a professor in the Harvard Business School, not psych, not social services, not HR, business. And what Dr. Edmondson understood to be true was that psychological safety had a positive, phenomenal impact on business. And she defined the term as the absence of personal fear in teams. So I'm in leadership development, and I spend all day long saying to people, you know what good leadership looks like. And I'm going to say to you right now, you know what psychological safety looks like. So while this is Dr. Edmondson's definition, I am much more interested right now, today, in hearing your definition. So what I'd like you to do is just take a minute and think for yourself, what is your individual definition of psychological safety? How do you define it? Write it down, put it in your head, put it in your phone. Just take about 60 seconds. Okay. Once you've got an idea, turn to a partner and just spend a few minutes sharing with each other your definition of psychological safety. How you've seen it, how you haven't seen it. Turn to a partner and let's get going. Okay, let's take just another 30 seconds. You can come, there's seats down here. There's seats down front. There's seats down here. Okay, let's come back together. I love this energy. This is great. Okay, can we come back together? Hello? Hi there. I love this energy. I'm sorry to interrupt because I feel like I can just let you go all day long, but I'm on a timer. You know, the hook is gonna come and get me out of here pretty soon. But I love this energy. I love the interaction. Who wants to share? I think we have time for a couple definition sharing out kinds of things. Who wants to go first? Yes. Okay.
I was telling my partner earlier to real complicate, but I made this really short and said psychological safety is an environment that welcomes vulnerability.
Excellent. Psychological safety is an environment that welcomes vulnerability. Good. Who else? Yes.
I just said to having resources to turn to when you are feeling that we're out, overworked, unsafe, or down for whatever reason.
Wonderful.
Whether that be a room you can just escape to, being able to take a day off, not having to explain yourself, or just going to someone, management or not, that you trust.
Wonderful. So having those resources right there who can, and managers who you trust that you can turn to. Beautiful. Anybody else?
I was saying for me, psychological safety is leaving work at work.
Nice. Okay. So being able to walk away and when you're done, and not having it follow you to your little picket fence.
Exactly.
Yeah. Good. Anybody else? One more?
I was stuck on a better one than that, so I was kind of halted. My partner had a great one. It was something to the effect of the absence of fear of being punished for trying.
That's exactly right. The absence of fear of being punished, for just getting out there and giving it a go, right? Exactly. So for me, psychological safety is an agreement where we commit to providing an environment where people can be fearlessly authentic. At Leaderology, we talk a lot about fearless authenticity. I'm all about it. Bring it. More. I'm not talking about you, Abe, I swear. Anyway, we'll get to that in just a minute. But I think that having that agreement, that commitment between us, whether spoken or unspoken, that we're going to work together to create a culture of fearless authenticity is what psychological safety is all about. And what I learned the hard way is that when that agreement is broken, there can be devastating consequences. So I promised you that I was going to tell you a little story and share with you the study, the blind study that I was continue to be unintentionally involved in for the last 10 years. We call it A Tale of Two Consulting Firms. Like all good scientific studies, there's a control group and a test group. This particular control group and test group are consulting firms, and they're very similar. They have a lot of variables in common. Same industry, same customer base, very similar services. Not too different of staff. In fact, I was in both of these consulting firms. I was actually a senior leader in both consulting firms. Same kinds of skills, same kinds of systems, very similar, lots of shared variables. The one variable that is different in the two different groups in our blind study is that one organization was built on a foundation of psychological safety, and one organization simply paid lip service to it. So let's talk about that for just a minute. How was psychological safety eroded in the control group? This is a tough one. This is a very emotional topic for me and for others. So I'm going to go slowly and carefully. I saw people, talented, smart, caring, brilliant people, visibly shake. I saw them humiliated and derided in front of their peers and in front of external vendors. I saw these hardworking people work their tails off into the night, chasing after unreasonable deadlines and expectations. And when they were lucky enough to almost get to that, to have those goalposts moved. Anybody here familiar with the comic book Peanuts? But you know Peanuts, when Lucy's holding the football and Charlie Brown's runs to kick it and she moves it and he falls every single time, but he keeps having that trust and he keeps trying. That's how this team was, working so hard, going after the goal, trying everything and having it ripped apart and looking inward and saying, what am I doing wrong? Right? Oops, sorry, over here. Things went from bad to worse. And I continued to try and intervene. I kept thinking, if only I can get a hold of this leader. If only I can get the leadership to understand that what they're doing is wrong and having a negative impact on engagement. If only I could move the culture in the direction that I know it should be. What I came to realize was that my presence, my continued employment, was providing a false sense of security. And the rest of the team thought either A, Marissa's going to fix this and it's going to get better, or B, Marissa agrees and is condoning the behavior. So I reached a tipping point because things went from bad to criminal. And the decision was to leave. And after I left, there was a mass exodus. And within 6 weeks, the company everybody had left. A couple months after that, a couple of the team and I were sitting around with a former client. And the former client looked at us and she said, what's going on? What are you going to do next? And you all left because Marissa left. And Lena looked at her and she said, no. We all stayed because Marissa stayed. And as I stand here today, 4 years later, the gut kick of that, the emotion of that, is still as raw and fresh as it was that day. We stayed because Marissa stayed. I'm a good leader. People like me. Doesn't matter. My staying continued, and I'm not, this is not being narcissistic and brilliant and all that junk. My staying encouraged people to stay. So the question is, does it matter if you're a good person, if you're not a disruptor? Does it matter if you're kind and supportive and developmental, if you're standing by and allowing this kind of behavior to happen? But what if we had psychological safety? What if we had psychological safety from day one? Right? What if we built a company and insisted that psychological safety was foundational to the entire thing? So as the CEO of Leaderology, we got together, a bunch of people and I got together, brilliant people, and we said, let's start a company and let's ensure that from the beginning, from day one, we have psychological safety. What would happen? Well, you know what happened? Quickly, like too quickly almost, we saw an immediate, within weeks, increase in productivity and engagement like that. People want to be involved. They want to get excited. They want that ownership of an exciting opportunity. We insisted on inclusive decision making. We insisted that everybody had a voice, that we weren't beholden to one egocentric executive at the top, but that some of the most brilliant ideas came from everybody in the organization. We insisted that people felt safe and were being developed. I'm picking on Abe for just a second. So Abe used to work at Leaderology. And what we told Abe as part of the interview process is that Leaderology is like the Hotel California. You can check out, but you can never leave. And so from the very beginning, when Abe came to work for us, we knew he wasn't going to stay. He had other dreams and other things that he wanted to do. And he did, and he left, and we helped him, and we cheered, and then we bring him back to all of our meetings. And so Abe is now in HR at Cannes, and loving it and killing it and working in the cannabis industry, which was his dream. And we are supporting and loving and helping him fulfill that dream. And it was a psychologically safe, I'm just going to speak for you, don't worry about it. Psychologically safe enough culture that from the beginning, we knew he wasn't going to stay, that he was going to go, and we were going to help him develop, right? So all these amazing things came from having a psychologically safe culture. And P.S., not that anybody cares, we're killing it from a business perspective, right? That whole thing about, business year over year, hitting the number, hitting the business results, year over year over year, killing it ahead of schedule, ahead of plan, because it's not incumbent on one person. It's the whole team has that ownership, and they're all holding each other accountable. In addition to all that, I don't know if you noticed over here, but outside agencies are recognizing the excellence that we're doing, the things we're doing at Leaderology, and the impact that we're having on the industry. That's being recognized, and that feels incredible as well. So these are the results that one gets when one starts a company with a foundation of psychological safety. So you might say to me, well, how the heck do you do that, right? So you may have heard of this company, Google, little company up north. Google loves data. They analyze the heck out of everything, including human behavior. Anybody here heard of Project Aristotle? So Google tried to figure out, this is now more than 10 years ago, why they had some teams that were incredibly high performing and other teams not so much. They looked at the teams, they split the data sideways, backwards, upside, downside, similar people in terms of experience, education, intellect, all the things, and still they couldn't quite figure it out. They even had people that were on high-performing teams leave, go to other teams, and then that team wasn't high-performing. So it wasn't transplantable. And what they found through all their research and interviews and everything was that psychological safety was the ticket. That was the key to high-performing teams. And they broke it down into behaviors so that they could operationalize what are the behaviors that high-performing teams demonstrate as a way to operationalize psychological safety. So they came up with these 6 key behaviors. Reframe conflict as collaboration. We all know that healthy conflict, when thought of as collaboration, brings much better results, right? So first and foremost, conflict is removed, embraced, let's go after it, let's collaborate, let's really get to the best possible solution that we can. Recognize similarities and shared humanity. We have more in common than we don't. Embrace the diversity. Look for the commonality. Anticipate reactions. If we're about to show up and say to Susie, your project is being delayed or whatever, how might she react to that? Flex our style. Utilize our emotional intelligence to meet people where they're at and deliver messages the way they can take them in. Choose curiosity over blame. The old adage of about a single throat to choke, it doesn't matter. Let's figure out what's going on and how we can solve the problem and get to the best answer. Nobody wants to be wrong. Nobody needs to be blamed. Let's work together to find out what is the best solution. Ask for feedback. Ask for feedback up, ask for feedback down, ask for feedback sideways, ask for feedback from your dog, ask for feedback everywhere, because we're only going to grow. Having a developmental mindset and looking for people to continue is going to only help. Measure psychological safety through employee feedback over and over and over again. If you're interested, I can send you the link to the article that really gets into Project Aristotle. It's a phenomenal study and not difficult to understand. So here's the house that Leaderology built. Number one, we started with a foundation of psychological safety. It's in the root, it's in the dirt, it's from the beginning. Number one, talked about that, psychological safety. From there, we built 2 pillars that are right standing on top of that foundation. The first pillar is our core values: bold, genuine, invested excellence. That's how we communicate with each other. That's how we communicate with our clients. That's how we hold each other accountable. And when we talk about excellence, we say we are focused on excellence always in all ways. So that's a core value. It weaves through everything we do. The next one is organizational diversity. Kay and I were walking up the stairs just now. My legs are much longer than hers. And I said, see, we even have diversity in terms of leg length in our company. So, but the truth is, just 2 weeks ago, we did an assessment. Anybody familiar with the Change Styles Indicator? It's a cool little assessment that looks at how you manage and embrace or don't embrace through change. And I was ecstatic to see that not only do we get our individual reports, but there's a composite report that shows the entire organization. And we spread out throughout the entire continuum. The whole company is just, you can see where we're all placed on there. So there's a lot of diversity, even how we manage through change. And because there's psychological safety, I'm on the far right, which is like I'm an originator. I'm like, let's change, let's go, let's do it. And there's enough psychological safety that the other people in the company are like, sister, hold it together. We don't care that you're the CEO. You're going after a ready, fire, aim approach to this, and we need to slow down, right? So lots of diversity, critical to our success. And then finally, these pillars are holding up our purpose, which is the true north. We are all about creating psychologically safe leaders, fearlessly authentic leaders, who then create their own psychologically safe houses so that others can be fearlessly authentic. Any questions about this before I kind of move on? Is it making sense?
Remember the name of the conflict assessment?
It's the Change Styles Indicator, how you manage through change. And there's 3 pillars and buckets and all the things that you would expect in an assessment. And it just talks about how an individual works through change. So I'm getting the hook from the back of the room telling me I gotta wrap this up. So what I wanna say to you is, if you leave with nothing, leave with this. The work of psychological safety begins with you. It's incumbent upon you to look inward, to take care of yourselves first, to take care of your teams first. And I hope that you'll take the time, maybe create a standard operating procedure where you do it monthly, quarterly, where you take the time to check in with yourself, to check in with your teams, to check in with your loved ones, and review these questions. And it's my hope that by advocating for yourself, by advocating for others, you'll be able to start narrowing that time. I'm not saying that anybody needs to leave like I did, but maybe you do, I can't say. But what I am saying is that I hope that you will do the work of psychological safety, because as leaders of this in this space, it's incumbent upon you to, number one, physician, heal yourself. Thank you. So I think we have a few minutes for questions. And if this is a sensitive topic and you don't want to discuss it publicly like this, not everybody feels comfortable like me going like, well, here it is. Please feel free to connect with me and we can talk privately. But if you have any questions or comments or anything you want to share, please feel free.
I guess my question would be, to your example, I was in something similar and left. Oh, thank you. I was just going to say, to your story, I was in something similar and left, and I've thought a lot about what I could or should have done differently. So I'm just interested in your experience. Do you think that you should have or could have done something differently during that time?
So it really depends on the culture and the person and the company, et cetera. What I was dealing with was a very flawed, shouldn't name names or anything, but narcissist and that kind of stuff, alcoholic, blah. And he would listen to me. And it gave me a false sense of, oh, we're going to fix this. I'm going to get him to see reason. And it was really just manipulative and to placate me to get me to stay, because the whole team was reporting to me. And if I quit, he was going to have to work. And so it went on longer than it should by a long shot, because I kept thinking, oh, but the team, I just love the team. And so I don't think so. I think people are people. And when they tell you who they are, believe them. I'm not going to say it was easy to walk away. It was really probably the hardest thing I've ever done. And I had no idea that I was going to start a company. I had no idea that I would get to hire a big chunk of them. Had somebody told me that, I would have been like that, because I thought I owned that company. I did not. And I was really invested in the work we were doing. So it's hard. But watching these people shake, watching these people have miscarriages, watching these people it was just horrific. And how can you with integrity and a good conscience stay? And when they said we stayed because you stayed, right? Anybody else? All right. Oh, yes.
I'm just going to say, we've been working on this. I was in a place like that, left that place, and came to a place that's basically my dream job, and with a CEO that cares. And we started working on, because he was so conflict averse, we started working on trust the second month I was there as part of the leadership team. And we're still doing that 7.5 years later. And so I guess the point is don't ever give up, because there's always another phase or another door you have to walk through in building that trust. And it doesn't happen overnight, but the fact that there was a desire to do that just made it all the better. But it really took years. And, I would just say, just keep trying.
Yeah. Over here.
So how do you,
looking forward, I don't want to be in that situation. Looking forward, how do you inform yourself to make good decisions before you're even there? How do I screen those people out? How do I not get in the same situation? Because, you're interviewing for a job, you spend 4 hours, maybe 8 hours, and then you're supposed to make a career decision. Any insights on how we get there sooner?
Yeah, and I'm going to turn this to the whole group because it's all about doing the due diligence in the questions that you're asking as part of the interview process. I don't know if you were at the earlier session this morning when you were talking about, why don't you share, when you were talking about how your colleague was asking questions at that other job that he was interviewing for to find out about how they look at DEI, for example, which it's a different topic, but it's the same idea where you're going to go in there and you're going to interview them just like they're interviewing you, and you're going to ask questions that are going to tell you. So go ahead and share the story.
Yeah, this employee went in very intentionally because the DEI work at our company was so important to him. So I think it's really thinking about your own personal values and then not just asking what they do because they could say it, but asking for specific examples of how they've actually demonstrated it. And it was such a fascinating story because this company is out in the world very committed to DEI. And so he thought it was a softball. Mm-hmm. And then, we at NBCU, we've tried to embed it in our culture, so it's not owned by HR and DEI, but it's really, everyone is expected to do it alongside their job.
Right. Yeah, I think where do the best ideas come from in this company? When was the last time you as a leader were challenged by somebody on the team? What happens when, I'm just trying to think even about our company, like there's so many times, the change situation is a perfect example. I'm on this curve, I'm an originator, and that shows up. I'm like, I know, what if we go to the moon? What if we're the first leadership development firm on the moon? Somebody quick, call and let's get going. And the team has the psychological safety to say, listen, Mrs. CEO, slow your roll, right? This is gonna fail, time out, let's think this through. So asking questions about what happens when you get pushed back, how are decisions made? I don't know, what else? What other good questions would you ask? Go ahead, Abe.
I would ask what regular meetings looks like what the engagement looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Depends on
Well, who runs the meetings, right? If it's just me yakking the whole time, I promise you the rest of the organization is not feeling psychologically safe. They are shutting up. And they're shaking their heads, and then they're leaving the room and talking about it because there's no trust, and they're conflict avoidant because they don't want to get beaten, right? So I think really being thoughtful about crafting those questions ahead of time will get you more information than you even imagined. Because people will tell you they don't even know they're lame, right?
Also ask them for their definition of
Right.
psychological safety.
Right.
When you get to a place, you've got through the hard questions, getting formal. At some point, if psychological safety is there, you would have felt it in the interview. And getting to that rapport place and then asking, I'm really curious. I've always been interested in the work of psychological safety, and I heard something that we all have our definition. I would love to hear what your definition is. How would you define it at this company?
I'm sorry, talking over you. When we started Leaderology, we had a launch party, and we invited a bunch of executives and we interviewed them. One of the questions was, how do you define psychological safety? And there was this CEO of a bank, and he's like, that's a bunch of crap, and blah, 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 blah. We didn't ever publish the video, you can imagine. But I was like, don't want to do business with him. Boom, not where we want to spend our time. He was real comfortable saying it's a bunch of hooey. And I was like, so glad when people tell you who they are, believe them. Done. We're not going to try and fix that. There are a lot of other companies we want to go partner with. So I think that's a great point. Ask the question. They'll tell you.
Hi. My question was just now I'm streaming. Is this better? Can you hear me? Okay. I don't talk in normal volume usually. So do you believe that any company at any point, not at any point, but at most companies at most points within their growth can implement psychological safety? I know you spoke about building it from the ground up, and that's the best place to be, right? Because there's nothing that exists without it.
Right.
But how important is wanting it, right? How important is like investing in it, or like how important are those other aspects that like change needs to happen? And like a bank, maybe if he did want it, and their bank has been there for like, I don't know, a million years, whatever. But like if he did want it, was that the difference between like, you know, being able to make that change and staying the same?
So I believe anybody can be a great leader with the right development, anybody. But I think that you have to start with an understanding from a business perspective, right? So there has been decades now of research around the impact, the business impact of engagement. Gallup, they've been, the Q12, they've been doing this stuff for decades. So if you start with an executive and say, highly engaged employees are more likely to blah, 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 and that leads to the bottom line and EBITDA and blah, 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 then you got their attention. Highly engaged employees equal dollar signs. Everybody got that? Great. How do we get highly engaged employees, right? So if you work backwards from the business, I'm a nice person. I like psychological safety because I think it's important. I think we're humans and we should be kind to humans. And I think we spend way too much time at work. And so therefore we should be kind and enjoying that. But guess what? That doesn't matter. This is a business decision. Psychological safety leads to highly engaged employees, which leads to better business results, period. You don't have to be nice. You have to be smart. Are you trying to pull me off the stage?
Gently.
Yes, ma'am. We're going to make him physically take me out. No, go ahead.
One more quick question, thanks.
I work with active and military members,
Mhm.
veterans, who are still
Trauma.
part of federal agencies, as an example, and that is a big part of their identity. When you're working with a workforce that lives and breathes, you know, in an environment that is not necessarily psychologically safe, how can you help them in that transition, whether it be momentary, from a day-to-day basis, or a long-term?
You know, it's interesting. Some of the employees at Leaderology, not the ones that were at the last company, new people who have joined the company since, have come from pretty traumatic experiences, other companies that were pretty traumatic. And I don't know if this is really answering your question, but helping them learn to trust and not like flinch. When I say, God, I need to tell you, you just did a really great job. And these are the 10 reasons what you did and I loved it, blah, blah. They're waiting for the but. They're just waiting for it. And I say, so thank you. And I leave. And they're like, whoa. Over time, like Rory said, the trust happens. It takes time. It takes investment. It takes leadership who understand it's worth the investment. Because if you invest and develop and build trust in a psychologically safe culture, I should put the slide back up, the business results are extraordinary. These people are engaged. They are thinking about this company in the shower. They are thinking about this company on Tuesday and on Sunday, and as they're putting their kids to bed. And not because I'm asking them to, but because they're excited and they have an ownership mentality. But it has to be leaders. It has to start with the leaders who understand that this is good for business. Does that answer the question? Okay.
Thank you so much, Marissa. Let's give it up for Marissa. That was just excellent.